Good morning. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is the first Finance Committee meeting after our reorganization after elections. I would like to call for a motion to name a chair to the Finance Committee meeting. Jill?
I'd like to nominate John Cini.
It's a nomination for Mr. John Cini to be chair of the Finance Committee meeting. May I have a second? That is Mr. Maroney. All in favor? That is unanimous for all those in attendance. Congratulations and thank you, Mr. Cini.
Can't wait. No, thank you. Thank you all. So we're going to get started. Today's Thursday, November 18th, 2021. It's a little after 8:30. We're here for our Finance Committee meeting with the Board of Education of Darien, Connecticut. The first order of business after the election was a review of the October 2021 and 2022 financial report. Mr. Rudo, I'll hand it over to you.
Sure. So this is the financial report through October. We are projecting a year-end positive balance of $104,260. The forecast does assume that we'll be reimbursed for all the items lost due to Storm Ida. One update from the previous month is PERMA has indicated that we will be reimbursed $30,210 for Storm Elsa. So we haven't actually received the check, but we are factoring that in since they did confirm we'll receive that. Those funds. Those losses for Storm Ida currently stand at $367,000. The total changes from the previous month are $66,141. Those changes are starting with the student interns at Darien High School and Middlesex. They have not been able to find a second intern at Darien High School and the two interns at Middlesex for the fall. So that is a savings of $20,150. There are some clubs not running at Middlesex, Hinley, Holmes, and some turnover savings from the step and lane for music totaling $8,013. Savings from elementary intramurals of $7,329, which is only currently running at Holmes. Savings of $4,000 at high school intramurals, which is currently not running. Savings of $4,500 in interscholastic supplies due to the YMCA agreement that calls for using the YMCA in Darien, not the Boys and Girls Club in Greenwich. Athletic transportation is a swing of $37,138, but showing a deficit of $26,826. There is a nationwide driver shortage, and it has impacted Darien. So we don't have as many drivers as we had to allow us to have during the week, what we call charter buses, which is primarily for sports. So some of those transportation rides have had to be contracted out, and those are at higher rates than what First Student charges, and those are for football, field hockey, volleyball, soccer, golf, and cross country. Savings from district legal fees, $12,500. That trend, positive trend continues. Field rentals, we are projecting it to exceed the budget by $23,604. As of actually yesterday, we've pretty much met our budget of $151,000. And we obviously still have spring left, so we are anticipating a higher amount collected for field rentals. We did have some additional staff turnover totaling $42,000. We are projecting the DEI consultant for $56,000 as a deficit if it's approved. Some Darien Summer School positive balances for some items that have been disencumbered totaling $4,025. Contracted speech shows a deficit of $34,000. The previous month, we had one SLP who was out on a long-term leave of absence. That one SLP is now 3 SLPs that are out on a long-term leave of absence, and they are being filled by a contractor. So rather than seeing those expenses in long-term subs, you see that expense in contracted speech. Special ed legal fees. We did shift as a superintendent adjustment some funds from special ed legal fees into contracted speech for one of those 2 additional long-term leave of absences. Out of district transportation shows a deficit of $34,800. This is a combination of 2 things. First, we did finally get the 3rd Suburban. We should have the driver by next week. So it's 1 more month than we were anticipating not having that Suburban. So there is a transfer that we'll recommend for that. And then there is some settlement costs associated with out of district placements for transportation. We had a resignation of an ELP para, so there is salary savings of $2,150. ELP revenue is $12,516 less than last month, as 2 students have been reclassified to special education and therefore not paying students. Workers' compensation shows a savings of $3,037 due to a reimbursement from PERMA. Additional savings in sewer, heat, and student accident insurance. The breakdown between the general education RCs and the special education RCs. So general education RCs are showing a positive $182,607. Special education RCs are forecasting a deficit of just over 87,000, and that is primarily related to the speech, SLPs on a leave of absence and the transportation, and then COVID 9008, which was the transfer the board approved at the previous month. So highlighting some of the changes in the various RCs. Again, 6,250 in Darien High School for one fall intern not being able to be secured. At the middle school, 13,900 as two interns were not secured. And then a positive balance of 1,345 for the geography B that's currently not running. At Hinley, a positive balance of 2,218 in clubs and councils as the stock market club is not running. At Holmes, we do have a positive balance of 34,282 as we do have a teacher on maternity leave who's now being covered for the year with a teacher at a lower rate, resulting in turnover savings. There is a positive balance of 1,032 as the literacy club is not running at Holmes. Changes in athletics, as I mentioned earlier, elementary intramurals is only running at Holmes, and so there's a positive balance of just over 7,300. High school intramurals are not running, and that's a positive balance of 4,000. And then again, the deficit related to athletic transportation of 26,826, as we've had to use private charters in place of first student. In RC 12, again, the revenue use of fields is a positive balance of 23,604. In music, RC 13, there's a positive balance of 3,418. 4 music stipends came in at a lower step than projected. In RC 16, legal fees continue to show a positive balance of 28,100 as legal fees continue to trend under budget. RC 19, we did flag the potential of the DEI consultant for $56,000. If it is approved by the Board of Ed, then we would bring a recommended transfer for those funds at the next meeting. In RC 24, contracted speech shows that negative balance of 34,000. We have 3 SLPs out on a long-term leave of absence. This is up from the one from the previous month. And then just to flag excess costs, we do have to file on December 1st, which is right around the corner. So at the next meeting, we'll update the excess cost projection based on that filing amount. We are still going to assume the 67.5% rate until the state comes out with an updated estimated reimbursement rate. And then in RC 26 ELP, the positive balance is now up to 10,710. And again, that is due to a resignation that happened earlier in the year. ELP tuition shows a negative balance of 29,263. We have 47 paying students. As I mentioned earlier, 2 were reclassified to special education, so that is down from the previous month. Just in terms of the grant forecast, I did want to flag one item. We were awarded another grant. So we have highlighted that here, the ESSER 2 Special Education Recovery Grant for $124,500. This is a grant for special education recovery services. It is a 2-year grant, and it has to focus on recovery services for dyslexia and other special needs. While we have not received the money, we did get a grant award for that amount of money. So the application still has to be processed at the state. And then the Unified Champion School Grant that Dr. Adley mentioned at the last meeting for $1,000. That was awarded by the Special Olympics of Connecticut, and it's to fund unified sports at the elementary level.
Any questions?
Richard, if you could go back to the athletic, the fall sports, the transportation, I guess deficit. You projected it through the winter,
Correct.
As I read the memo.
Yes.
And then but it hasn't been projected through the spring yet.
For the spring, we're hoping to kind of go back to what the normal routes are.
Right.
As of last week, First Student was able to make available 2 additional buses,
Okay.
which will help alleviate it. If we don't get more, then we're going to have to readjust that forecast to assume continually contracting out with Landjet or other private charters.
So without any remediation from First Student, if I did back the envelope math, would it just be another third added on to roughly?
Roughly.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Just to clarify, RC 19 curriculum, this DEI consultant, that's what we're discussing this afternoon?
Correct. So I flagged it as a potential expenditure. Should it be approved, then we'll bring a transfer to the board at the next meeting. Should it not be approved, we'll just take it out of the forecast.
Okay, and I'm going to go back. I'm sorry, I missed RC 18, the personnel turnover. So basically the phenomenon is that we're seeing more turnover, but we're hiring at higher levels or higher salaries.
So you're seeing a higher number of teachers who are leaving, but you're seeing a combination of the teachers who are leaving, not necessarily being at the higher step. You've had a number of teachers who are either step 10 or below. Typically, when the teacher leaves, It's usually step 17, 18, 19. So when they leave a 10 or below, odds are you're going to hire at a higher rate. So that's why you would expect our turnover to actually be much higher than budget because of the quantity of teachers. But given the mix of teachers who have left, that's why we're only slightly above what we project.
So from an analytical point, the savings per turnover is much less than what was budgeted.
It's actually slightly better than what's budgeted, but one would expect, because you had 53, we budgeted 28, that we would essentially blow the budget out of the water by having significantly more
Right,
savings.
okay,
The reason we didn't get those savings is the mix of teachers who have left.
understood.
If you take out the teachers who were step 10 or below, it ended up being about 29 teachers. We budgeted 28 teachers. So actually, if you take that out, we were relatively close, which is why we're that 11,000 or so better than budget.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful. Go ahead, Jill.
On the interns, one of the functions of the interns, as I understood it, is to do some substituting. Are we still on track with our substitute budget, or are we looking at a potential impact because we don't have interns?
So we have interns at the elementary level, which is
Yeah.
typically where we would see the biggest impact for not having interns. At the secondary level, we've seen an uptick in the teachers covering classes, which is for that $32 amount. So because of that, we've actually been relatively close in line. If it wasn't for the teachers covering teachers and we were bringing in daily subs or additional building subs, we probably would see that slight uptick.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
So on the savings in clubs and councils, Middlesex, Hinley, Holmes, savings from elementary intramurals not running. What's the reason behind all that stuff not running?
A mixture of lack of participation or a staff member not being able to be found to run the club.
Okay. So is there instances where there's students that want to participate and we're not finding staff members to do it?
For the most part, they find another club for the student to join. In terms of intramurals, the district very rarely actually runs them at the elementary level, with the exception of Holmes.
Right.
That typically is the one school that does run it internally.
Mhm.
So this is for elementary intramurals. It's kind of just following what you've seen in the past.
Go ahead.
On the contracted speech, do we have any concerns about why we have 3 speech? Is that just a coincidence, but why we would have 3 speech professionals on a leave of absence?
I believe it's just medical
Medical.
reasons.
So it's a coincidence.
So with the contracted speech, we are assuming that they're going to come back at the date they gave us. Obviously, if that long-term leave of absence extends, then we'll have to update that as well.
Thank you.
And I just have one last one on the grant, the new grant, Rich. What's the timing on that?
So we got the award only a few weeks ago. We have to file it with the state, and the state has to end up approving it. Once it gets approved, you have this year and next year to spend it. So it just has to be based on recovery services for students.
And did you want to just comment quickly on the food service financial report?
Sure. So the food service financial report did improve from the prior month. We were plus a little over $38,000 for the month. So the P&L currently is a negative $126,473. Just in terms of overall food service operations, you typically don't become cash flow positive until February or March. It's almost like a retail operation where Black Friday is when they actually turn in the black. You have some of those sunk costs in the beginning, like retirement and health insurance. So you kind of have to dig out of that hole. Average daily sales are over $13,000, and they are trending relatively well for November. So we are forecasting a positive $56,000. The district did collect another $5,800 from the pavilion. And then when we do the November, you'll see another almost $4,500 from the pavilion. Probably would have been a little bit higher, but I believe the last game was called at around halftime because of weather. So that did dampen sales a little bit for November. But so far, things are looking well in October and November.
Okay, great, thank you. Without any other, go ahead. Sorry, Joe.
Back on the turnover question, the number 54, do we think that that's driven by COVID and large turnover in the wake of COVID, or do we think there's something else driving that?
There is a teacher shortage in Connecticut, and I believe even in the tri-state area. I think there's some of it's burnout. I think some of it is because of COVID. Some people want to be a little closer to home in case their own children end up having to be home for whatever reason.
Right.
So it's really something that's not just specific to Darien. Our neighbors in Wilton, New Canaan, Weston, Westport, they're all seeing the same.
Yeah, so it's just a statewide issue, and we are seeing more people, I would say, that sort of transfer to somewhere else during the year, which is unusual. But that's another thing that's happening districts across the state.
Because positions are opening up
Yep.
because of the general shortage, and so we're seeing people move
Yep.
for whatever reason.
You have less new teachers coming in, and essentially we're just trading teachers back and forth with districts.
Higher churn.
Yep.
Thank you.
I guess I would just ask, are you seeing in catching up with Mrs. Klein, any increase in services or contracted speech or anything that you're seeing forecasted down the road, excuse me?
So we have started to spend some of the recovery services in the ARP grant. If you look back at the previous month, there really wasn't that much of expenditures.
Right.
It's really primarily in the areas of speech and OT, and some consultant services.
Okay.
It hasn't really exceeded our expectation yet. I think part of the benefit is the district was open longer than some other areas.
Right.
And so they did receive some of those services, but we're starting to see a little bit in those areas.
What percent did you dip into that grant thus far?
So that's where- we're still well under. So for contracted speech, we budgeted 50, we spent 13.
Okay,
So maybe about a third.
thank you. Everybody set? Oh,
I
sir.
would just note under the DEI expenditure, no matter who it is or what it is, I fully expect that we'll be making a commitment of something at some point towards something, but
And just to be clear, because I think there's some confusion out there, this is to, the board came to the administration and asked that we increase programming around some recent incidents that occurred in the schools. Is that the correct?
yeah, that's part of it. That's well, that is the big ongoing plan to address that. So,
Got it.
And really, this is anticipating an expenditure, no matter who it's allocated to or where.
Got it. Thank you. Tara.
So
Oh, I'm sorry.
so that DEI expense, that doesn't necessarily, it's not associated with one particular person. It's just an amount to be allocated for DEI that can be used.
Well, at some point, we're going to have to continue to move forward with this, addressing these matters, right? And the administration can't go over budget without an understanding from the board. I think that
Right. My question is, saying yes to that expense is not saying yes to a
Correct.
certain person.
Correct.
But we're not saying yes today.
Yeah, we're,
Right. No, I know. I'm just,
It's not a transfer.
Mr. Maroney.
Yeah, just a question on Storm Ida. You have in your report that we're currently at 367. But we expect more to accumulate as the repairs are needed. Can you just elaborate as to, we haven't tested out the equipment, or we're waiting like for a snow blower to see if that's going to work, or what are the as needed repairs?
So there are some items that are still trickling in. Some items were sent to different shops to see whether or not the item was salvageable or not salvageable. So at that 367, we're expecting to be slightly higher. We don't expect it to be really more than 400,000 at the end of the day, as about 97% of the items have been accounted for. But there are some pieces of equipment that are still being evaluated whether or not it could be repaired or has to be totaled.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Hey, Rich, just a quick update on that. Is there any progress on the 3 trucks that we have to replace?
They are still waiting for production.
Thank you.
Wow. Any other questions? Okay, then we'll move on to the budget transfers for October 2021 to 2022.
So we have 4 transfers for consideration. I did break up the transportation one into 2. So the first one is for $24,300. That is to cover the cost of some transportation tuition agreements. We are recommending taking the balance from the savings in the interns at the high school and the middle school, as well as turnover. The second transfer is for $10,500. As I mentioned earlier in the year, we had forecasted getting the 3rd Suburban in November. If it was a little later, we'd have to bring another transfer. So this is for 1 more month of not having that Suburban, and we are recommending taking the savings from the savings of the teacher and resident membership fee that was covered by a state grant. The third transfer is for $34,000 for contracted speech. This is again due to a leave of absence from an existing SLP, and we are recommending taking that from the salary savings associated at homes from the maternity leave. And then the fourth transfer is for $26,826, and that is to cover the overages for athletic transportation, with savings coming primarily from athletics, interscholastics, the YMCA agreement, trainer savings, intramurals at the high school and the elementary, and then some savings in the clubs and councils that are running but at a lower step of the budget.
Any questions on the transfers? I don't see any. I guess just want to make a comment and like the subcommittee's thoughts on this. When we go and create a board committee report, I would love to, or would like to take a recommendation to the general board with these transfer and give a recommendation or a disapproval to the administration's, proposal. So
Mhm.
if that's okay with everybody, and I see no concerns with this, in my committee report on next Tuesday,
Yep.
I would just like to mention that the subcommittee recommends the transfers. Dennis, I just want to make sure you would be okay with that. I'm getting a thumbs up by Mr. Maroney, so.
Yeah, I think
Okay,
it
great.
validates the work of the subcommittee, which is what we're trying to do. And while everyone reads the package, I think it helps knowing that the subcommittee has reviewed, questioned, and approved and is recommending that approval. So it makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So without it, go ahead, Joe.
No, I agree with you. I think there are a few things that I would love for you to note as part of the recommendation. For example, that we're not concerned about long-term the substitute account going up because Rich indicated we're using the teacher coverage. So, otherwise I would have been concerned about that transfer, for example.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments? All right. So I think now we'll move on to public comment.
Good morning. If you would like to speak during public comment, please click the participants icon on the bottom of your Zoom screen. Next, click the raise hand option. The facilitator will identify you. Please state your name and address. You will have up to 3 minutes to comment. No raise hand at this time.
All right. No one's in the room, so I would like to solicit a motion for adjournment. Ms. McCowan, take a second. Mrs. Worm, all in favor? Thank you very much. We'll adjourn.